AI in action. But I must say that we want to talk a little bit about AI, and then we would move on to talk about the other work of Harvard, like good work, good citizen, and so forth. Now, I want to play a video. Is it possible that we have a video that we talk about AI action with MI, and this time the target of MI is sports, is bodily kinesthetic intelligence. In fact, we have had set up a AI sports center in our primary section, and we try to play this 3-minute video so that you can see how AI is now being applied in sports, in our action, in helping children to do more exercises and to learn more and improve their health. This is a short video of about 3 minutes, and the people is trying to put this up, and they are trying to work on. Be patient. If this does not work out, we would continue our conversation. Just a minute.
Okay. Why don't we start the dialogue with Howard while they're fixing the IT problems? So first up, I would like to invite Eric from the United States. Okay.
Hả? 41 42咁樣好唔公平啊！明明我跳咗50下，我真係有認真數㗎。夠啦！呢個年代仲有人用手數嘅咩？梗係用 AI 啦！等我帶大家嚟參觀我哋學校最新嘅 AI Sports Center 啦！呢度有3部人面識別系統，每一部都可以同時融入5位學生一齊進行體適能活動，而且呢度可以參加各種唔同嘅活動，包括高抬腿、開合跳、跳繩同埋立定跳遠。無論你係初學者定係運動員，呢度都好適合你嘅挑戰。等我介紹下呢度點樣玩啦。每次參加活動嘅時候，企喺橙色圓圈指定嘅位置，之後對住鏡頭舉手，電視螢幕顯示開始就可以開始玩㗎啦。咁樣真係好得意啊，又刺激又好玩，我一定要贏嗰啲男仔啊！咁等我哋嚟睇下邊個最高分破晒啲紀錄佢。快啲嚟支持 AI Sports Center， 一齊用 AI 提升你嘅運動表現啦！咦，雪明，你喺度做緊咩啊？除咗喺 GTAI Sports Center 參加活動，大家仲可以喺屋企玩㗎。只需要下載應用程式，就可以隨時隨地開始訓練㗎啦。我已經下載咗啦，裏邊有好多唔同嘅運動選擇，例如高抬腿同埋開合跳。哇，咁樣真係好方便喎！我哋喺屋企都可以保持運動嘅習慣。老師可以喺 App 入邊設定唔同嘅運動計劃，我哋喺屋企做完之後，系統就會俾你睇到你自己嘅成績，隨時都可以了解到自己嘅表現㗎。耶！咁樣我就唔怕冇時間落街做運動啦，喺屋企都可以做。耶
our children in Hong Kong. They are grade 1 to 2. They are very young. What I want to show you is that AI is now permeating in all our education, and these young kids are even making use of AI through face recognition, through using the techniques that they have, they learn, and then recording what they have done, counting numbers, counting how many times they have done it, and then they can even do it at home. They can even do it at home and then keep the record and trace it, and then you can turn it into graph, whatever. That is one of the things that we try to apply AI in individualized instruction, not in math or language or other things, but in sports. So even in sports, AI is being applied. So how would you like to see the young children all over the world enjoy playing, and now they play together with this assistance of AI?
Okay, well, thank you, Rex, for that amazing tour of my horizon. You actually reminded me of things that I have said or done that I have forgotten. So whether that was your brain or AI or a combination, it was a very good and very up-to-date documentation of my activities, my thinking, and my writing. A few of the people who are with you or who are watching know me very well. But I want to say a word for the people who don't know me. First of all, as I mentioned, I'm at home with my wife, Ellen Winter. We're both psychologists who have spent our lives in the Boston area at an organization called Project Zero. And if you're interested in Project Zero, Ellen has just posted online, and you can also purchase it at Amazon, a report of the impact of Project Zero's work of over almost 60 years. So Project Zero doesn't have to be a mystery anymore. If you go to the Project Zero website, or you go to Amazon or another book dispenser and you just ask Project Zero Impact Report, you can find out what we've been doing over those many years. As you and everybody else today knows, I developed my ideas about intelligence over 40 years ago in the book Frames of Mind. And Mara Krzyzewski, who is with you now, actually read the proofs for that book. So you know she's at least 43 years old since she was able to do that. And yeah, I'm hearing some exchanges now. I'm hearing some exchanges now. Yeah, thank you. So the ideas of multiple intelligences were developed many, many years ago. And as Rex has said, I've moved on to other issues, and we'll talk about some of them later. I didn't think much about artificial intelligence until recently, because of course it's really become very big in everybody's thinking nowadays. But I want to remind everyone that multiple intelligences theory, MI theory, is a theory of the human mind and the human brain. If we could understand the human mind, the mind that all of us who are listening have, if we could understand it very, very well, I think we would discover that the human mind can do 6, 7, 8, 9 things very well. I call those the multiple intelligences, but no two people have exactly the same profile. So you might be more good in musical intelligence, somebody might be more good in spatial intelligence, somebody might be more good in interpersonal intelligence. and so on. And the reason the ideas have caught on in education in many places is because every teacher and every parent who has more than a few children know that children don't have the same kinds of minds and they don't have the same kinds of brains. And if you assume that there's only one kind of intelligence and you can array everybody in terms of how high their IQ or their intelligence is, you have a very different picture of human beings than if you assume that all of us have a number of different skills, intelligences, parts of the brain, and what your profile of intelligence is not necessarily the same as that of a random other person or even of your children or grandchildren or your parents. And the idea has never been that popular in psychology because psychology as a discipline is wedded, it's married to the idea that there's one intelligence and the IQ test can tell you how much intelligence you have. Now, if you were a believer in IQ, you would probably admit, well, some people with high IQs are better in language, and some of them are better in mathematics, and maybe they would admit that some of them are better in spatial abilities, but that's as far as they would go. And if anything, they would tend to argue that if you're good in language, you're probably good in logic, and you're probably good in spatial. And if you're not, there's probably you have some kind of unusual brain. You have an alternative kind of mind. But once you get away from language and logic, which is what the IQ tests really test, then almost everybody realizes that these are different kinds of skills, how spatial somebody is, how musical, how much they understand other people, and so on. But if I were to have said in 1983, people have different talents, everybody said, sure, we know that Yo-Yo Ma is more talented in one thing, and a football player is more talented in other things, and a therapist is more intelligent in other things, and a poet is more intelligent in other things. But it's that I said these are intelligence, not just talents. That's what made me unpopular in the world of scientific psychology, but very popular in the world of education or in the world of parents or relatives who keep their eyes open and their ears open. So that's enough of a background for those of you for whom these are very new ideas. Now, the field of artificial intelligence was actually named in 1956, so it's almost 70 years old. At that time, it was connected only with computers that could do logical things better. So that you had computing systems which could solve problems in math or in logic very well, and they called that artificial intelligence. Then in the 1980s, the model of computers changed radically because of what's called neural networks, and I'm not going to try to explain that. But once we began to think of artificial intelligence, not just in terms of computing ones and zeros, but rather of neural networks, which can process millions and millions of images or displays of various sorts and to draw inferences, then the world of AI as we know it today and the world of AGI, artificial general intelligence, emerged, and that's why we could watch the video that Rex showed of the young people in the school who are making use of AI to help them with their gymnastics, their exercises, their dancing, and so on. All right, so Howard, why are you giving us this this nutshell update? Because the Turing test was actually developed in about 1940 and was written about around 1950 by a British mathematician and logician Alan Turing, and even though he didn't know about any of the stuff I just mentioned, he said, if you could invent some kind of a device which could answer questions well enough that nobody would know whether it was a human being or a computer, an AI, then we would have passed an important milestone. And even people who've never heard of anything I said have all seen movies like The Matrix, where you see science fiction. But now, for the first time, this isn't just science fiction. This is something that all of us can do every day using a large language instrument of one sort or another. And that's the movement from AI, artificial intelligence, to AGI, artificial general intelligence, which we're all beginning to hear about. Some of us are excited by it. Some of us are frightened by it. And almost everybody is confused by it because we don't know what to make of an entity which seems to be smarter than human beings or any other kind of animal, than anything else that was ever even imagined in science fiction. So I like the question that the questioner raised. Is his name Eric? I forget.
Yes.
Because he assumed it was a measure of personal intelligences, whereas I would have assumed that it was a measure of personal and linguistic and logical. And depending what the questions were, it might also have used musical intelligence or naturalist intelligence. But whether or not Eric and I would pose the question in the same way, I would say that if we were to use any definition that Alan Turing would have thought of in 1940 or written about in 1950, we'd have to say that a computing system that could do as well as Eric said has passed the Turing test, whether it was a Turing test involving just the psychologist's AI or using Gardner's AI, which is broader. I would say that when we think about Gardner's AI, one of the intelligences, as you know, is bodily kinesthetic intelligence. And it's a debating point whether robots or any other entities that computer sciences can create could demonstrate bodily kinesthetic intelligence. A former student of mine, Mia Kainanen, posted on my blog just in the last 2 weeks an argument that computing systems could never do bodily kinesthetic intelligence in the way that human beings do, dancers, athletes, and so on. That's a debatable point, but you can read what Mia wrote and you can see whatever reactions there are. I guess for me, the one intelligence that I wrote about, which I really don't think we can attribute to an AI system, is intrapersonal intelligence. Now, interpersonal intelligence, I think people understand, is how well you understand other people, your children, your spouse, your coworkers, somebody who you read about in a novel or you see in a movie, or if you're a lawyer who you interrogate in a court. And Shinri, who's with you in Thailand, and I wrote about diplomatic intelligence because a diplomat certainly has to be able to understand the people in the countries that the diplomat is negotiating with. So I think we can see how an AI system could handle interpersonal intelligence. But I personally am stymied. I just can't understand how we can compare intrapersonal understanding, the way I, Howard Gardner, understand myself, the way Ellen Winter understands herself, or Rex Lee, or Mara Krzyzewski, or Shinri Furuzawa. I don't know what it would mean for the computer system to say that it understands itself, except perhaps just to indicate everything that it's ever done or processed before. And since we know that AI systems can have billions of bits of information that they're dealing with, I don't know how we could ever determine what the intrapersonal intelligence of that computing system is. So I'm sorry for this long speech or tirade. I knew that the question was going to be posed, but I think if I simply said, well, an AI can pass the Turing test or can't pass the Turing test, it wouldn't have had much meaning. So what I've tried to say is that unless we understand the variety of intelligences that I've studied, unless we think carefully about which sorts of things a computing system could do and which sorts of things wouldn't make any sense for it to do, like explain its understanding of self, I don't think we can really meet Turing in the way that he deserved. So Rex and
Okay.
Eric, excuse me for this monologue. I promise to be much briefer in what follows.
Okay. Thank you so much. You talk so much about AI and its implication. Now, Eric, would you like to continue your question? You want to ask again?
No, I think.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, that's already. So, how about the next question by Leo about the recent issue about AI? Yeah. The next question can yeah Leo.
After hearing what Howard has said, I think I'm going to change my question to a little bit more straightforward. Do you think to what extent can AI replace human power in different industries? And in terms of human intelligences, can it survive the AI conquest? That's my question. Thank you.
Okay, well, that's a great question. It's an important question. And in a sense, it actually it relates back to Eric's question because it has to do with the kind of world that we want to have. For the sake of argument, let's postulate that AGI, artificial general intelligence, could do everything as well as or better than human beings. One extreme would be to simply to say, all right, let's turn everything over to AI, and then we can play Twinkle, we can play Tiddlywinks, which is a game of moving tiles around, or we can just look at the stars or look at the sky and let AI do everything else. And that's possible. The opposite would be, and there are some people who we call Luddites, and sometimes my wife Ellen is in that group, who said, I wish AI had never been invented, and let's banish it. Let's send it to Mars or Pluto or to another one of the billions of galaxies and get rid of it. That would be the other extreme. My own thinking is that many of the things that AI does, it does as well or better than human beings. And so we should let AI do those things for us, even though it doesn't mean we can't do it as well. Just because AI can win a game of chess or Go or another kind of board game doesn't mean that we shouldn't play it anymore. We should play it if we want to, but we shouldn't fool ourselves that we're the best anymore because AI can do it better. My own thoughts about AI, and this will, I think, touch on a number of the other questions, but we can revisit it as warranted, is that our educational system ought to be focusing much more on human aspects, social aspects, emotional aspects, ethical aspects, moral aspects, things that really have to do with the human condition. And I am not in favor of having AI take those over. I think those are fundamentally properties of our species, which makes us special. But I think any kind of a technical or office work kind of thing, which can be done better by AI, should be done by AI, which doesn't mean that we can't do it if we want to. Let's say 90% of my mail could be answered better by AI than by me. But I like answering my email. So unless I drop dead or I'm sick or my wife says, stop doing your email, I'll continue to do it. But I don't think anybody should be forced to answer their mail or somebody else if AI can do it better. Now, where this becomes very, very complicated, and I'm sure the other questions will dwell on this, is what should we do in school?
Yeah.
How much time should we spend on a standard curriculum of math, history, chemistry, fine arts, so on? This, I think, there are going to be deep disagreements, but let's get to those questions when they come up.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much. And yes, AI can do a lot of things, but we still have the social, emotional, human things, a lot of things, and ethical things that AI may not be doing. Now, the next caller would be from Thailand, and Professor Boonchak, you want to ask a question? Yeah. Yes.
Good
Not this
morning,
one.
Professor
Yeah.
Gradner. Well, it's very early in morning for your time.
Good
Well,
evening.
Yeah.
All right. I would like to continue from your reflection in the previous two questions a little bit. Well, as a principal of a school for the gifted student, I really would like to know that within this rapid advancement in AI technology, are there any particular intelligence that more important for the gifted student, especially in science education?
Okay, well, I'm glad you added that last clause because, of course, one of the controversial things that I have long maintained is that there are different kinds of giftedness, and while giftedness typically refers to people with high IQs who are good in language and logic, math, there are other kinds of giftedness as well. And as I just said, maybe people now who have a social giftedness, a diplomatic giftedness, ability to understand themselves and other people may be much more important to cultivate than people who can master algebra or calculus or analytic geometry earlier. But to try to put myself in your shoes, I think that whoever ends up in your school, however the giftedness is defined, I would be in favor of discovering what it is that they're interested in and helping them to advance as quickly as possible in that particular sector or sphere, and then leave it as an option to what extent they develop in other spheres. Now, this is where my wife and I have an extreme disagreement, and if she wants, she can pipe up. Let's just compare mathematics and history, for example. You might say, well, everybody in a gifted school ought to become a master in history, whatever that means, and a master in mathematics. And I would say no. If the person isn't particularly interested in history, let it be on the side for a while. If they're not interested particularly in mathematics, let them put it aside for a while. And even if in your school, kids, let's forget about language, are very good in math and science, as you know better than I, there are 20 different branches of mathematics and 100 different branches of science, and stuff like figuring out the structure of a protein, which used to take dozens of people, now takes a few minutes on in an AI system. I think that even within the areas of mathematics or science, I would encourage your students to develop those particular strands which interest them. Now, life is long. I have 5 grandchildren. One year, one grandchild was very strong in one area, and I said, maybe we should encourage that. The next year, he was interested in a different area, and I said, fine, let him do that. So I don't think anybody should be sentenced to do analytic geometry or the history of Eurasia forever. And the wonderful thing about AI is you can get a jump start in almost any field now. You don't have to start from the very basics. So I have a rather extreme education philosophy, which is find the strengths and interests and push those, because people can always later on in life or later on in the year pursue another one. But this goes against the almost mandatory thinking in my country and many other countries, which is at least through secondary school and maybe even through university. If it's a liberal arts university, everybody should take a certain number of fine arts courses and history courses and math courses and courses in physics and biology and chemistry. And I think in the era of AI, those should be options. They shouldn't be requirements. That's the takeaway. A lot of stuff which we now require should be options. And the wonderful thing about AI, even at my age, in my 9th decade, if I suddenly get interested in the prehistory in Latin America, what's been found in the Amazon, or for that matter, what's been found in Western China, I can go online and I can learn more in a day or two than I could have 50 years ago with years in the library. That's the amazing thing.
Okay. Oh, very, very good. I was to say that, yeah, we need options, but there are just too many things to learn. We would not be able to learn so much. We must make use of our time. Now, how about Mara? You want to make a question now, please?
Sure. Hi, Howard.
Good evening, Mara.
So one thing that's sort of been on my mind is that a lot of the examples that I hear about AI seem to me to be focused very much on individuals. And you may know or have heard me quote Loris Malaguzzi, who says that the aim of teaching is not learning, it's setting up the conditions for learning. So I'm just curious what thoughts you have about AI supporting people learning from and with each other, and setting up those conditions as opposed to like a one-on-one tutoring kind of experience.
Sure. Yeah. I'm glad you asked that question, and you will know my whole answer, but nobody else will. First of all, while I have a radically different view of schooling, there are 2 entities which I think we need to preserve in some form, and we don't have the time for me to explain them, but I'm simply going to use the words. One is religion, and by which that I don't mean God, but actually a concern with ethics and morals. And 2, scouting, a term that refers initially to a entity invented in England over a century ago, Boy Scouts, but I don't mean the Boy Scouts, and certainly not the Boy Scouts in England in 1908, but rather group activities with peers, where you play games together, where you learn together, where you challenge one another. I learned a tremendous amount from Boy Scouts, even though I don't know anything literally anymore. And I learned a tremendous amount from going to Hebrew school, even though, again, this is not something that I think about consciously anymore. So I think we need entities like that, which get at much more of the human social dimension. Then, as you, Mara, know better than anybody else, even better than Shinri or Jackie Chen, is that we're studying very early immersion in preschoolers of a sense of I, we, and they, because whether it's in Japan, China, Italy, North America, South America, young people do develop a sense of who they are, what groups they belong to, and what other groups they don't take seriously or they may dislike. That's they. But as of our last few years, we don't just have I and we and they, we have it. And it is AI, whether we access it through a handheld device or on a screen or an implant in our brain or in our mind, that is going to be every bit as big a player as human beings are. And you and I met last week with Ying, who is a professor at the Harvard Graduate School of Education. And Ying is actually studying how very young children think of and relate to various AI devices. And even though I and you may not like it particularly, and people who are on this webinar may not like it particularly, these intelligent entities may have at least as much meaning for young people as human beings. And as we know from work in therapy now, a significant number of adults and teenagers would rather have intersections with an AI therapist than with another human being. And in many cases, the AI therapist is very good. But in those tragic cases where the AI therapist doesn't notice that there's a suicide imminent, we certainly don't want the AI device to be the major source of support or solace or advice as compared to other human beings. So the real challenge, and I guess Loris Malaguzzi, who wrote about this 60 years ago, probably had this in mind, is how we who are born at present as individual entities relate to all the other entities, old and young, living or dead, and then digital or skin and bones. That is the real challenge of our century. And I guess if I were in charge of a school of gifted children, like so many of Rex and his colleagues are, I would really be focusing much more on the human dimension, the diploma dimension, the I, we, they dimension, and how we make sure that it doesn't control the world as happens in movies like The Matrix.
Thank you so much for your wonderful answer. Next up, we have Dr. Yasani. You may post your question.
Good morning, Dr. Gradner. I'm Usman.
Hello.
Yeah.
Good evening.
I'm a past president of the Asia Pacific Federation on Giftedness. You used to be our keynote speaker in Taiwan, 2006. So I met you there. Yeah. Yeah. And my question will be the question that teacher asked me about the MI. They asked me, Dr. Usani, if I focus on using the MI in my class, in my school, what's going to happen if my student graduate and they want to get into a better high school, a famous high school, or university, a higher education, that they usually have a traditional test for student, the requirement usually be a entrance test for them. So it's not like the way they teach MI in a classroom. Is there a problem in the US also? Have you, or this is a problem in Thailand?
Yes, this is what I would call a political or policy issue. And that means that those of us who are educators or scholars don't have as much to say about this as people who write the laws and the rules. And certainly in schools in Asia, China, Taiwan, Japan, Korea, the notion of a single test, what is it called? The Gaokao, has been in practice for thousands of years or hundreds of years. And even though the items on the test may change, the belief that there's a single measure which should determine whether you have higher education. I'm going to use a technical word. I think it's very stupid. And I think it's completely out of touch with what we need in the world going forward. It reflects a very antiquated, ancient view of merit, skill, and need. But as I just said, it's very, very hard to change those things. And even if all the educators in the world said, we would like to have a test of how you get along with other people, or whether you can think of new questions, or whether you can figure out the best way to solve climate change or viruses, it would still be very difficult to get education policy to change in most countries, and especially in the East Asian countries that I just referred to. And of course, when you have millions and millions of students, it's more difficult to change things. In Finland, if they wanted to change things, they could do it easily. In India, they've got they probably have 1 billion high school, no, they have hundreds of millions of secondary school students, and they need a more efficient way of doing it. Here I have radical ideas that are so radical that I'm afraid to post them on my blog site. But I'm going to let you in on a secret if you promise not to tell anybody. And that is, I think colleges and universities are going to change infinitely in the next decade or two, because the kinds of skills they're looking for and the kinds of examinations that they use are completely anachronistic. They don't really relate to what we need in the second quarter of the 21st century. There always are going to be some people who are gifted at being scholars. I might have been one of them. And those people ought to have a chance to do that. But I can tell you in the United States and the other countries that I know, 90% of students who go on to higher education have no interest in a broader kind of education, in learning about things they didn't know about. They want to get a job and make money. Some of them just want to be able to make money enough to live. Some of them, if they want to go to a place like Harvard, want to make billions of dollars so they can either save or ruin the world. But 90% of the students don't have either of those interests. And I know enough in reading the Chinese newspapers and the Indian newspapers to know that most people there who finish universities don't get the jobs that they want. And their parents are saying, why did we give them this higher education, even when it's free? Whereas in most countries that I know, people have to pay for higher education. In the United States, they have to pay $100,000 a year for higher education, and nobody's going to want to pay that if their kids can't get a job and make a good living. And as we said earlier, the whole occupational landscape is going to change totally, even in my lifetime. So I'm sorry to be a bearer of gloom. You have to really decide: do you want to do the examination system that's required in your country because it's been required since at least 2,000 years, or do you want to think about what's really needed for the 21st and 22nd centuries and prepare young people for that? Anybody who's listened to me so far knows I'm much more interested in preparing for the future than in reliving the past. But I also said policymakers are not interested in what I have to say, for better or worse.
Thank you. Thank you for your response. Next up, we have Dr. Mary Joy from the Philippines, and she has the following question.
Hi, Howard.
Mary Jo.
As you know, that we've been really focusing on how we can use multiple intelligences to do good work for the past 30 years. And now looking forward, you just, I'm dovetailing from your last statement of thinking about the future. a future that's fast changing and that it's going to be very much AI driven. If we are to backward design education to prepare the kids for that future, what do you think would be the essential values and skills that we need to ensure are being given, especially in basic education, to make sure that these kids are not only ready for that future of work, but more essentially, I think, also ready to continue to do good work?
Okay, well, first of all, let me say, so nice to hear you. I imagine I could also see you, but I'm busy thinking, not looking. And I think you may have been the first person ever to really connect multiple intelligences to good work and good citizenship, not just speaking, which I find easy to do, but actually recognizing and acknowledging, including of Aquino, to whom you gave an award for that some years before she passed. So you really have been a tremendous leader in this field. And if I were anybody else at the conference today, I would say, listen to Mary Joy, don't listen to Howard, because she's ahead of the game. But let me try to speak succinctly to the question you raised. Even I believe every child needs to have the basics, which means reading, writing, math, and some form of computing, and not coding anymore, but basically understanding something about the world of computational. So in that sense, I'm a traditionalist. I also think that every child needs to have needs to have a glimpse of what it means to do history, literature, physics, biology. And the metaphor I'm using, and I'm about to post a blog on this, is the Children's Museum. I've been a lover of children's museums for 60 years. These are places where you can bring kids of any age, and they have all sorts of things that they can play with, try, return to, futz around with, and so on. And I would like every young person to have a children's museum introduction to the various disciplines which we've developed, whether it's botany or ancient history or solfege in music or watercoloring and painting, enough of a glimpse that they know that it exists. And then here's where AI can be so valuable, indeed invaluable, showing you that there are ways to get to progress in that. There are ways to get better, and you can do that alone or with AI and a tutor, or the phrase I like, with AI and a coach. Because I think over the next 25 years, even if I'm heard from again, all over the world, teachers will become more like coaches, more like people who help you connect to whatever you can learn from, which in many cases is AI, and let you and give you feedback on how best to use it, whether you're using it well, whether you should try something else, rather like a guide in a children's museum, which doesn't tell you how to play with the water or with the bricks or with the climbing structure. But if they see you doing the same thing all the time, says, why don't you try something else? So maybe this is even a place where my wife, Ellen Winter, and I might have more of an agreement, is that if we combine teaching and coaching in the manner of a good docent at a children's museum, we may have the best of both possible worlds. And even though I haven't visited your school in many years, I would tell everybody in the world to see what the Multiple Intelligences School in Manila and perhaps elsewhere is doing these days, because you've not just been a thought leader, you've been a doing leader.
Okay, thank you. A very nice question and answer. Now, I'm checking the time. It is already 9:10 here, and I think we can continue for no more than 20 minutes. We want to end this by 9:30. So, Howard, thank you so much, and still 20 more minutes to go. And I want to invite two of our colleagues in Thailand. Manfa and Professor Sarum they both would ask questions, and then you would hear two questions, and then you can answer them. Yeah, please.
Good morning, Professor. My name is
Hello.
Namfa. I'm from the Princess Mahachakuri Award Foundation, and we work with the best teacher in 14 countries. I think a lot of I prepared 3 questions, and I think it has been answered already. So I just want you request in this room we are about 100 of teachers from science, from arts, from special education, from language, and from vocational education. So can I request you to just say something to the teacher in this hall about why we have to, to pay important for the multiple intelligence in teaching the student. Can you give us a bless so when we go back, we can start actively in the classroom? Thank you very much.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for that question. Even before AI was known, I always talked about what the 2 things which multiple intelligences theory should stimulate educators to do. And I call those individualization or personalization and pluralization. Individuation means knowing as much as you can about every student and trying to teach that student in ways that that student can learn the most effectively. That's individualization. When you have 40 or 50 students, it's obviously very difficult to do. You have to learn from previous teachers, from parents, and from the students themselves about how they learn. Of course, if you have 15 students, it's easier. But now, because of AI and because of computing in generally, you can individuate for everybody because there's always more than one way to reach a child, and there's always more than one way to present stuff. And so individuation, which used to be a privilege of people who could afford a tutor, like Alexander the Great, could be tutored by Aristotle, everybody can have a much more individuated education. The other thing which is so important, but really not well understood by most teachers, is pluralization. Anything that's worth teaching can be taught in more than one way. And if you're a teacher and you can say, this is the only way I can teach the Pythagorean theorem, or this is the only way that I can teach you how to paint perspectively, or how to play a fugue on the piano, or how to dissect a frog, then you're not a good teacher. Any teacher ought to have a number of different ways of teaching. And if you don't have it, ask another teacher to help you, and you can trade your way with other teachers. Of course, with computers now and with AI, there's nothing that can't be taught in a number of different ways that can't be pluralized. And so to your teachers, I would say, think of your student as having his or her own mind and trying to present things which work well for that mind. And think of your subject, your important ideas that you want everyone to understand, and think of how many different ways you can present them. And here's where the work of Project Zero, which I referred to earlier, it's an organization which Mara and Shinri and Mary Joy know well. We develop ideas in education, and we try to give them a push in the right direction. And if you go to the web to pz.harvard.edu, or you go to a bookseller and look up Ellen Winter's book on the impact of Project Zero, you can read many, many ways to reach students in ways that work and to demonstrate, even to skeptics, that learning is working, that their minds are being stimulated, that they're thinking about things in ways they haven't thought about before. And this is where people like Mara have spent decades trying to develop good teaching and learning routines. So the other thing, of course, you can do is send your teachers to the Project Zero Summer Institute. It's always in the last week of June of each year. It's been then for over 30 years. Or just have them take the courses that are available for modest fees, and you can find about them on the website. So excuse me if this is an unpaid political commercial, but we have spent almost 6 decades developing ideas in education, and we'd love for people to make use of them.
Okay, thank you. Next up, we have Shinri, person you have worked with for such a long time. Shinri, please.
Hi, Howard.
Hi, we miss you.
I miss you too. So my question is, you have said that one thing we must never leave to AI is the ethical decisions. And I would like to ask how you think we should best prepare our students to make good ethical decisions in the age of AI.
Wow. Well, you know, I have a lot to say about that. But the first thing I want to say is that Shinri, together with Annie Chichura, and I wrote a paper which either has already been displayed on Rex's MI research or will be about multiple intelligences in our time. And that's where we speak about animal intelligences, where we speak about plant intelligences, and we speak about AI. And that's a paper I go back to all the time, and I could never have done it without Shinri's work and Annie's work. But on the issue of ethics and morality, as you know, and as Rex alluded to, probably most of our work over the last 30 years at Project Zero that I've been involved in has been work on good work and good citizenship. And this involves people at work or people involved in any kind of decision making, trying to figure out the best way to deal with difficult problems which have many facets to them and where there are many different perspectives one has to consider. And one of the things that we've done is to develop different kinds of dilemmas, and they're posted on the Good Project website. It's called the Good Project. And these are situations which, by their very nature, cannot be easily resolved. Let's just take what we were talking about a minute ago. How do you take a school and a system which has been testing for thousands of years one way and change it very significantly? And we talked there about a number of Ds. The first is to define the dilemma. So what is the dilemma about the use of a standardized test in an era when that seems to be out of taste, out of touch? So you have to define it, then you have to discuss it. You should debate it. You have to make a decision. Then you have to enact the decision. And then you have to debrief. Debrief is not every decision we make, even if it's thought about a lot, is necessarily the best one. How could we have done it differently? How could we have done it better? And then this may be the most important thing I say today. And thanks to you, Shinri, you stimulated it. All of our work on good work and good citizenship, all of our work on defining dilemmas, discussing, debating, deciding, debriefing, assumes that we are in a democracy. And there are different kinds of democracies, but democracies basically are entities where you trust one another to try to make the best decision. And if it's not, to try to change it and not to use dictatorship or other kinds of demonic ways. And in my country, I'm speaking from my country now, democracy is at risk. And if democracy is at risk, all of our work and good citizenship will be much more difficult to carry out because it means that we can no longer debate and decide fairly. And as some of you know, I know a lot about what's going on in Hong Kong. I know a fair amount about what's going on in Thailand. and I could add Western Europe and Latin America and the Middle East. And democracy is under threat everywhere, everywhere. And if we don't have societies with a reasonable amount of democracy, then all of the stuff we've tried to do about having to do with good work and good citizenship is going to be infinitely more difficult to carry out because we're going to have to be defensive rather than dialogic. So this is a heavy message, but if I can't give it, I can't expect anybody else to do it forever. And if my memory is correct, in the newspaper today, we're reading about Jimmy Lau in Hong Kong. And will he be in jail for the rest of his life because he has tried to promote democracy? I will leave it at that.
Okay, thank you. We still have about 7 minutes. There are 2 more questions. One from Professor Kuo of Taiwan, China. Yeah, please.
Professor Gardner, this is Yilong Guo. I'm teaching at the Hong Kong University of Science and Technology. Over the past years, I closely collaborate with Dr. Wu Dianwu from Taiwan and Brenton Scherer to work on the MyDays. And then we try to adapt MyDays in simplified Chinese version and traditional Chinese version. And recently, we have been thinking about in the AI year. Okay, so like how AI can enhance the assessment of multiple intelligence. So like I think it has been bothering us for a while. Any comments? Thank you.
Sure. Well, of course, I've known Gradner Scherer for decades. He was a student. He developed the Midas test. And 2 months ago, Ellen and I were meeting with him and his wife in our home to catch up on things and also to discuss existential intelligence, something that he and I have both been interested in. What I would say is that for people who have a singular and old-fashioned view of intelligence, the Midas is very valuable because it gets you to think about different kinds of abilities and capacities and potentials, including ones which would have been ignored or not considered seriously in the traditional multiple intelligence test. And I think that the very fact that one has to think about a range of abilities and how we array in terms of those abilities and in which ones we most want to enhance and how we can best enhance them, I think that's extremely valuable. And I think that's the great strength of the Midas. How it can affect schooling or teaching or training, that's something which goes beyond any kind of instrument. So I would only say that places and people who are sympathetic to the Midas and to other multiple measures of multiple intelligences are a much more likely audience to affect than people who really believe there's only a single intelligence and the standard IQ test can tell you about that. Changing that is moving like gravestones in a graveyard. So I'd rather us use the model of figuring out the structure of a protein, where AI now can do that in a fraction of what it took human beings to do it. And I also think that just talking about the profile that the Midas elicits in people is often, in a sense, very mind expanding because it makes you think about things that you may not have thought before. So I'm glad to meet you virtually. And I guess there's time for one more question, so we should probably have that question.
Yeah, very good. Yeah, thank you so much for the answer. And now this would be the last question by a researcher from a country, Azerbaijan, and has Mr. Javer Massimi. Yeah, you can ask the last question, please.
I am warmly greeting you with a deep love for education. I am Jafar from Azerbaijan. Thank you so much for your best time. It is a pleasure. Before moving on to my question, I would like to briefly highlight 2 points. Firstly, the program New Challenge based on my presentation was broadcast live for many years on the official Facebook page of the Minister of Science and Education of Azerbaijan. world-renowned professor participated in this program as guest, and the shared observation was that children don't feel happy at school. School is boring for them. From this point of view, it can be concluded that children are not able to fully realize the potential. In other words, they don't receive education that corresponds to the intellectual abilities. And the education system often fails to answer the question of what kind of intelligence a child has. The second point concern artificial intelligence, which appears to be interesting paradox between AI and education. Actually, traditional schools focus on answer. However, AI focuses on question. It means for schools, answers are considered important, not question. In conclusion, I believe that future safety or potential risks of AI depends directly on human purpose. And by the way, my question, how can we achieve the widespread implementation of multiple intelligence in education system worldwide in context where centralized examination system dominate? How can public school apply the theory of multiple intelligence in practice? Additionally, what's the concept?
Thank you so much. I think this is a very long paper, and you may have to write a paper to answer Mr. Massimi. Maybe you can. We have only about 2 minutes. You can maybe make a conclusion.
Sorry, only one question. What is the main lesson you have learned from life? Thank you so much.
Okay.
Well, I'll take a little bit more than 90 seconds. On your question, as I said to an earlier questioner, changing policy is very difficult. And maybe it's more difficult in democratic societies, but in a democratic society, you're more likely to meet the general needs of the country than the needs of a particular interest group. And whether it's Azerbaijan or China or Thailand or the United States, there's always going to be a yin and a yang, a pull between a centralized deciding entity, the government presumably, and that is what people who are more informed but who have less agency, and those are people who are scholars and educators. And it's always going to be a push and a pull between those two features. On the question of the life that I've led, what's most important to me is how I've dealt with people who I work with and people in my family. And even though I'm sure I've made many mistakes, I hope that on balance, that the way I've dealt with them has not only been positive, but that maybe they've taken some lessons that they can pass on to whatever posterity has. When it comes to, if I had a portfolio in Azerbaijan and I was influenced by multiple intelligences, I would simply try to create demonstrations, whether it was in a school or in a workplace or in a museum like the Children's Museum I've described, to show that many more people become engaged and many more people become productive if you pay attention to their own interests and skills rather than if you try to push them all through the same kind of strainer. But this is something that's been true since classical times in the West, and I bet it's true since the Han Dynasty in China. There's always been a pull and a push between those powerful people who think they know what is right and try to impose it on everybody else, and those people who are more democratic and more demagogic and who thinks there's lots of wisdom in many places, and we should try to make use of that rather than to try to force everybody through the same kind of filter. And I won't live long enough, but I hope that some of you do, to see that eventually the scale can move more toward pluralism and toward democracy and toward multiple intelligences rather than a singular view of everything, which in my view is likely to be disastrous.
Yeah. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Howard, for spending so much time with us. Tonight we have a very good sharing among us and the author of multiple intelligences. We talk about MI, we talk about the AI and many of the problems, and even Howard would discuss a little about the politics and the democracy that we would now be facing in face of MI and a lot of things. It is wonderful occasion that we can have this broadcast live from Thailand, and very good occasion that that we have a direct communication with Howard, and I like very much to have a big applause to Howard and his wife Alamina. Thank you so much. Yeah. We do hope that in the future we will have more of these dialogues going on, and that we want to have MI Forum to continue year after year, and probably in the next few decades, and hope that in the future, Howard, I really hope that I can visit the United States again and see you again in the future. And thank you everyone. Thank you so much. So we can close. Yeah, thank you. Okay. Okay, thank you so much, and thank you for all the audience coming to us. It is our honor to have you to be here at tonight. So many things that we have to discuss, and we heard many of the ideas from Howard Gardner, and I appreciate you spending so much time with us, and hope that you have a wonderful evening. And tomorrow morning, there are more workshops and training that we will have.